you have 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. 95% of those thoughts are ones that came from the past or are actually untrue. And this is crucial. So if that is the case, then if 95% of your thoughts are from the past, we have to break those thoughts away from the past and start living from the future, especially if you're living from a place of pain and regret and anxiety and depression, because you're only going to continue to create that reality for yourself in today's environment. Well, here's the other cool thing that Napoleon Hill forgot to really say, well, or at least I've been researching, is that 95% of your daily actions are actually subconscious and unconscious. Think about it. Blinking, breathing, going to the bathroom, driving your car. How many people have driven home the same way and forgot once they got home? Oh my gosh, I don't even remember if the light was red or green. You're operating on a habitual pattern because your body and your mind utilize rituals and habits to do that. So if that is the case, we're actually only operating at 5% of our capacity as humankind.
Are you a hardworking dad, juggling family responsibilities while dreaming of building wealth through real estate? Welcome to the Invested Fathers Podcast, where we explore how to balance investing and fatherhood. I'm your host, Kenny Johnson, founder of East West Capital. Over the past 5 years, I've been buying real estate to free up my time and secure my family's future. Now I'm here to help you do the same. Join me as we navigate the real estate world together, building wealth and strengthening our families. As my grandma always said, East West, home's best. Fired from a 6-figure job right after getting married, Logan Freeman chose not to get another one, but to build a legacy instead. So we have Logan Freeman in the house, everybody, from NFL player to real estate investor, who after his first year did 150 deals, now 1,600 plus units across 4 different states, and still going since when this was written out. Logan, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm energized, thriving, and excited to be here, Kenny, man. It's been an enlightening conversation the first time you and I were connected. I've been looking forward to this conversation, especially with the focus being on fatherhood and figuring out what truly matters in life. And I get a lot of questions around commercial real estate, around cycles, and it's all good stuff. It really is. It's informational and it's educational, but nobody really talks a lot about the ups and downs in the entrepreneurial roller coaster and how that can have an impact, whether that be positive or negative, on your personal life and how to manage that aspect. Because if we have all of this material success, but we don't feel content and comfortable inside and internally, and we don't have anyone to share it with, then what are we doing this for?
Yeah. No, thanks for hitting the nail on the head there, because as excited as I get about real estate and making money or building a business, building an empire, it all really does fall flat if the main things aren't the main thing. So we're going to be diving into that soon, Logan. I think to give the audience a little bit of context of how we met. So I've been doing more things on LinkedIn, and in your description of who you are, it says Mr. Kansas City. And I was like, who is this guy? Why would he claim to be Mr. Kansas City? So after a few minutes of digging into your content and the things that you're doing, I was like, this is Mr. Kansas City. This is awesome. So thank you so much for joining me today, Logan.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So let's start here. When you have an NFL background, give us sort of the turning point of how did that look? And then what was the transition like out of that? Can we start there?
Yeah. I always identified as an athlete growing up, and it's probably because I found some sort of outlet for the amount of energy and intentionality I had that could be somewhat productive, and also didn't have the most stable upbringing with my father. And I'm sure we can talk a little bit about that, but I found a lot of comfort and a lot of purpose as an athlete. So I really poured myself into that. And that allowed me to play at the collegiate level on the football field. And my mom always said that even though you're there playing football, you're there for your academics, and you need to make sure you focus on that. Well, I really grew up in college, I would say. That 18 to 22 year period is so formidable for young men. And thankfully, I had structure, I had routine, I had coaches, I had accountability, all of these things that a lot of these personal development books and gurus might teach you was ingrained in me through athletics. And I just really worked hard at it and was an ESPN all academic All American. And that was probably out of all the accolades I received was one of the most important to me because it was like, hey, this guy doesn't just work hard in the weight room and on the football field, but also in the classroom. And I've learned that I am a learner, and through Strengths Finders, my top talents, two of them are learner and input. So not only do I like to learn, I like to share what I learn. And what else is a better resource now than LinkedIn as a platform to share the different information that you have and that you're learning. And I call myself Mr. Kansas City for this exact reason. Folks like you, awesome people, find me because they may be interested in Kansas City, but I'm claiming to be Mr. Kansas City. So I better talk to that guy. And maybe just as many people don't reach out because of that, because they're like, hey, I don't know what he's saying about himself, but it has spurred some really incredible conversations. And so after college, I got picked up as an undrafted free agent with the Oakland Raiders. And I was out there for a couple weeks and made a couple cuts and had the opportunity to continue on after I was cut from the Raiders with the 49ers. But I felt God calling me in a different direction. My passion, my fire, the intentionality that I had for college football didn't really translate over to the professional field because you truly are fighting for your life and to get paid, and took some of that motivation out of it for me. And I said, I'm a smart guy. I can use my brain instead of just my brawn to put a living together for myself. And I just thought there was more. And so I went back to school and finished my master's degree, but I didn't have a scholarship anymore. So I needed to get a job. And so I would drive to Sweet Springs, Missouri and work all day making 265 cold calls during the day. And then I would drive back home and go to school from 5 to 9. And I spent 8 to 10 hours in the library just catching up on the schoolwork on Saturdays in the library there in Warrensburg. And one thing that really, I think, changed me was in that period of time, I also transformed my body. I was an offensive lineman, so 335 pounds. And I figured that, one, that's probably not the healthiest way to live, but selfishly too, I also know if I'm to attract the woman that I have envisioned in my life, for me, I probably need to lose some weight. And so in 6 months, I lost 120 pounds, but probably the bigger transformation that happened in that period of time this was pre-podcasts. Really, the only podcasts that were out there were John Lee Dumas and Lewis Howes, A School of Greatness. So I was actually still listening to CDs, Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and all these figures and these CDs, Napoleon Hill, all these folks. And I was like, man, I don't know why they're not teaching this stuff in my master's program, because this is where it's at. You sent me over some information about the pod previously. I didn't look at it because I was sitting here in this chair meditating. If you were to tell me 5-10 years ago that I would be meditating on a regular basis, grounding myself, centering myself, getting control of my body, I would call you crazy. But I've learned all of these different tools and skill sets that I can now apply to different areas of my life. And fast forwarding a little bit, finishing my master's program, I was a new person. I remember walking in to one of my master's classes, one of my last classes, and walking by some of my buddies that they didn't even recognize me. I was 100 pounds lighter, and they were like, wait, Logan? Holy cow. I wasn't on social media or anything like that. So it was like 6 months had gone by and I had dropped a person. And then that was really eye-opening for me. But something else really big kind of happened to this. I graduated. I had a new job, not making cold calls in Sweet Springs, Missouri anymore. I had a good job lined up. My father had battled drugs and alcohol addiction his whole life. One bedroom house, 13 brothers and sisters on a tobacco farm from North Carolina. And I can only imagine how difficult his upbringing was, right? Like, we never really got to talk about that much. Well, he had some complications with his health, and in 35 days, my dad passed away. And so you can see I'm 24 years old. I'm no longer an athlete. I've lost 110, 115 pounds, and I lose my father all in a matter of 6 months. And wow, well, that puts some perspective into your life. And I had some mentors in my life that really helped me say, hey, this is a turning point in your life. This is a decision time for you. So you have the choice to either make the same decisions that your father did and or other folks and go down one route, or you can start to make better decisions. And that's when I realized that your results in your life are really the cumulative effects of the decisions and the actions that you take. And I got started after burying my father. I got started as a franchise consultant with Jimmy John's, and I was shipped off to Champaign, Illinois, and then Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then planted back here in Kansas City about 10 years ago. And I was there for about a year and hit a glass ceiling and said, hey, I need to be paid for my performance. And so I left that company and went to a startup company in sales. And then 2.5 years later from working there, I had been doing some real estate just on the side with myself. And I had taken a different job, and I was fired. I was fired in 2017. This guy that has redefined himself and has read all of these books and Franklin Covey sales certified, and boom, one day you're fired. And so another decision point and turning point in my life. And that's when I decided no longer am I going to work for anyone else. I need to be able to go create my financial and future. And that's when I fell into some real estate. So that's my journey, Kenny, on how I got to where I'm at now.
Sheesh, dude, that's awesome. I know we didn't go through all that the first time we talked, so I'm totally fascinated by the identity shifts. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I heard was you mentioned the dad. You mentioned dad earlier, and maybe a strained relationship there, but there's that motivation of performing results. Yes. Obviously, the sports thing is like very much a results type of thing. You rather make the cut or you don't.
That's right.
And you know how crushing that could be to go through something that would be a shift there. But I definitely applaud the resiliency, man. You mentioned the strength finders of learner and input. I think that is an awesome combination. And you even mentioned before we recorded, like you have something going on tonight that's like a webinar with 60 plus attendees already figured out. So you are continuing, you have evolved for sure since Mr. NFL player.
Yeah.
Would you say you're like just not even the same, like completely different from that time?
I've been listening to some things recently here by Ed Milet, who I really enjoy listening to. He really comes from nothing and has created this life for himself and truly is a believer. And he's also out there spreading the message. And he talks about your cells in your body. They're always regenerating. They're always changing. And when you get to the actual biomechanics of who you are as an individual, you're actually not the same person that you were a year ago. But your brain and your beliefs and your thoughts and those mental models that you hold, it's a computer program that if you do not upgrade, it will stay the same. But truly, at a molecular level, you are changing on a regular basis. So I want to embrace that. And I want to embrace the God-given talents and abilities that I've been blessed with and ensure that I'm not putting the lamp shade underneath the bushel basket, right? And making sure that I'm shining my light as bright as I possibly can. So I think there's probably been 3 to 4 different evolutions, and I'm likely going through one right now of becoming a better father, a better Christian man, better husband, better business person. And I think the moment that a lot of people stop learning is the moment they get out of school. I began learning when I got out of school. I've read more books now and done more studying now than I ever did in my MBA program, my undergrad, any other things, because it's interesting to me, right? And I believe truly that true success in this life is not how many commas in the bank account. It's not how many assets you have under management. It's not how many doors that you have on the multifamily side. It truly is your influence and your impact that you have had on other folks, but also being able to recognize that who you are today doesn't mean that you have to stay the same person, I think is incredibly important. And so I think success truly is in life, the whole goal of this is growth, and is growth physically, it's growth mentally, it's growth spiritually. And my other two top talents are achiever and discipline. So you put learner and input next to achiever and discipline, and then individualization is my fifth one, which just means I grew up with three women around me, and I have a high emotional quotient, a high emotional intelligence, and thankfully I can utilize that in a lot of different ways, which is why I interact with people on a regular basis, right? And so you put that achiever and discipline together, and I want to make sure that people understand that if you take that StrengthsFinders test, just because you were given a strength, it's really a talent. Those are the talents that you were given, if cultivated, can become your strengths. But each one of those strengths, let's take our achiever for example. They have balconies, meaning I can achieve something, but they also have basements that say, I'm only going to focus on this one thing and everything else is going to fall by the wayside. Well, that you could see how that could completely deteriorate somebody. If all you're doing is focusing on money, or all you're doing, where's your health, right? So you're living in the basement of that strength, which is really just a talent. So you have to you have to recognize that early on. For myself, just because I had learner and input didn't mean everybody I talked to wanted to learn or be inputted on, right? And so those are things that you have to keep in mind. And I'm continuing to learn and grow and evolve on a regular basis, and making sure that I understand that, right?
Yeah. The growth mentality dictates time. Like, how am I growing I've worked on the same thing for a year, or hey, I have been reading book after book after book. Like there's a time element to growth. And I think we all have different clocks of like urgency, maybe availability, margin. And I sense the love for learning from you, but you're not just learning to keep it inside. You're learning to, like you mentioned, input and achieve. You have disciplines. So I think that is a lesson for us all on, are we stuck learning? Have we stopped learning? I think I judge my learning from how hard it is for me to listen to a book or read a book. I'm just like, nah, I'm not really in the mood for that. Or I don't know, whatever that resistance is, usually is the indicator for me of, I need to break this. This is bad.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that learning is also something that can be addictive, but you have to learn it at a deep level. So I adopted the Feynman technique probably 6 or 7 years ago. Instead of reading 100 books per year, 50 books per year, whatever, that one article that said CEOs read 50 books a year or whatever, it might've been the most damaging thing for the personal development space. Because if you cannot teach it to a fifth grader, you do not know the information at a deep enough level. So no longer do I feel the necessity to finish a book. I get one aspect out of it, and typically you get a couple good ideas out of a book and the rest is filler. Yeah, maybe the stories help you remember it, but I'm looking for something new, something that's going to stick with me. And then I need to figure out, how can I learn how to teach this to a fifth grader? And I need to know it at that deep level, right? And so that's been my methodology recently, is going much deeper than focusing on going so wide, right? And just achieving and reading another book. And one thing that's been blowing my mind here recently is the actual science of success. And Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, has been read by more than any other personal development book by a tenfold measure. Okay, so hundreds of millions of people have read this book. Well, are there hundreds of millions of rich people in the world? No, there's not. Look at the numbers. Now, maybe they are rich in a different way, but there's a reason that people read that book and then it just went on the shelf and they forgot about it, right? Well, the biggest thing, that the secret that Napoleon Hill gives in this book, is that thoughts are things, and everything starts with a thought. But then he stopped there. You have to take this further. You have 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. 95% of those thoughts are ones that came from the past or are actually untrue. And this is crucial. So if that is the case, then if 95% of your thoughts are from the past, we have to break those thoughts away from the past and start living from the future, especially if you're living from a place of pain and regret and anxiety and depression, because you're only going to continue to create that reality for yourself in today's environment. Well, here's the other cool thing that Napoleon Hill forgot to really say. Well, or at least I've been researching, is that 95% of your daily actions are actually subconscious and unconscious. Think about it. Blinking, breathing, going to the bathroom, driving your car. How many people have driven home the same way and forgot once they got home? Oh my gosh, I don't even remember if the light was red or green. You're operating on a habitual pattern because your body and your mind utilize rituals and habits to do that. So if that is the case, we're actually only operating at 5% of our capacity as humankind. So what do? Well, we have to go back in the mornings and we have to be able to train our subconscious, because if we can train this 95% of the actions and the thoughts and the feelings that we're having early on in the morning, now you're going to be operating from a place from abundance, of generosity, of love, if that's what you're feeding yourself early on. And this takes time to get to. So the idea being 60, 70,000 thoughts per day, 90% of them in the past, 95% of your actions are subconscious. We need to start dictating what our subconscious is feeling, thinking, and doing on a regular basis. And that is where the movie The Secret tried to bring this law of attraction thing to the mainstream media, but where it fell short was, I'm going to sit in a room, I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to manifest $1 million. I'm going to manifest a six-pack. I'm going to manifest the person that I love. No, you have to take action, but you have to train your subconscious to be doing things on your behalf that are going to attract the right things in your life. And that is the true science of success. And so John Mitchell wrote this book recently called The Missing Secret, which he studied Napoleon Hill's book. And this is straight from his book. And I know John, and I've talked to him, and thank you for putting this out, but it's in my work bag right here. It's probably the only book I'm going to read this year, because every chapter I go to my Remarkable and then I write down my main takeaways. And then every single day I have affirmations that I'm writing down, because writing crystallizes thought. And so I'm trying to get to the root, the science of success, because most new personal development stuff is just the same from Bob Proctor, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie. These guys had it figured out, and now people are just repackaging it. Well, I'm just going back to the source, figuring out how to implement that into my daily routine and feeling comfortable with that. So it's been a long journey just from a learning standpoint and input as well, from going so wide and now going a mile deep instead of a mile wide.
The habits that you're talking about, writing things down, morning routines, retraining. Give us, if you don't mind, what's your morning routine look like right now?
Yeah. Well, I get this question a lot. I'm an early riser, have been for a long time. So I'm up at 5 a.m. The first thing I'm doing is thanking God for another morning and starting from a place from gratitude. Before my feet hit the bed or hit the floor, I'm starting from a place of gratitude. Getting dressed for my morning workout, going and making my wife coffee and programming that. I don't like coffee, but I program her coffee to be done at 6 a.m. every single day.
Dude, we are brothers in that. We are straight up brothers. Thank you for that.
And then I hit the prayer. So I'm going through the gospel for the day. What is God trying to tell me today? Instead of starting from a place is, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to achieve this. I'm going to do that. It is opening up my heart, my mind, my soul to say, God, what is it that you want me to accomplish today? So that's number one. Number two is this methodology, this 12-minute methodology from the book, The Missing Secret, which I have gone through and written this whole thing out that John has researched all the science behind. I went through the step-by-step process. So I have that in a Google document, and I have that read to me every single morning. So I'm training the subconscious brain, right? Okay. Then it's get the shoes on, head down to the workout room, and get the LinkedIn post done for the day. So the LinkedIn post is done. I'm warming up. I hit the workout for about an hour. Kids are starting to wake up. I jump in the sauna for 10 minutes, recalibrate, and then I'm upstairs with the protein shake, hitting the shower, grabbing the kids, going to school, and starting the day off. Drop the kids off at school, and then I go directly from there to church every single day. So I go from dropping the kids off to either adoration or actual service every single morning. And that's when I have my Remarkable tablet out, and I go through a pretty strict routine. I'm reviewing the previous day. What went well? What didn't go well? Okay. I'm thinking through, what did I listen to from the gospel just now from church or this morning? And I'm writing that down. So what was the message? Because it's really easy to forget. Reading any type of message early on, 3 hours later, you can forget what you read. So I'm rehashing that. I'm going through my top 5 meaningful conversations that I'm having throughout the day. If I don't have 5, then I know I need to make some calls to get to my 5. Okay. And then Andy Frisella's power list methodology. I don't do to-do lists. I do power lists. What are the 5 things that if I accomplish today are going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? I don't always have 5. Sometimes there's 2. But the 2 top things, the 3 top things that I'm trying to get done are there on my Remarkable. And now I just started writing down all of these different affirmations as well. So that's the morning routine from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. There you go. And then from 9 to 5, it is busting out the work. It's meetings, conversations, deals. And then I turn off and then become husband, father from 5 to 9. And then 9 o'clock typically is we're tired and we're going to bed most likely, but we'll watch a little bit of TV. I'll do what St. Ignatius talks about, which is called the examine of conscience. So, hey, where did I show up as the best version of myself today? Where did I fail? Do I need to apologize for anything? What could have I done better, right? And then I go through a little bit of gratitude before bed, try to get some positive mentality going before I go to sleep. And then TV's off and bedtime is there, and I fall asleep in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Wow. That was not just your morning routine. That was your day.
There's my day.
Dude, I gotta say, you may be the most intentional person I've had on this show at this point. I don't mean to puff you up. I'm just saying you have thought about this. How old are you, Logan?
30. I just turned 35 last month.
Okay. So, man, thank you so much for sharing that, dude. And I don't even want to say, wow, like we were joking that we were going to have a meaningful conversation before we hit record. And then maybe a few years from now, we might be like, what were we thinking? But dude, I see you as someone who's super intentional in what you do, how you spend your time. And let me pivot there because part of my thoughts before recording here were we're going to talk about Kansas City. We're going to talk about real estate and kind of the nuts and bolts. I don't really see that as a high meaningful conversation based on what we've talked about thus far. So let me go into, I'd say the life of a dad.
Yeah.
You've been hyper intentional about mindset, how to showing up for yourself, the best version. I love that you said, who do I need to apologize for? Just like very faith focused as well. Let's just shift to the fatherhood side of life. How many kids do you have? What's your current status with dadhood?
Well, I have a 6-year-old girl, Isabella. I have a 4.5-year-old son, Ezra, and I have about an 18-month-old daughter, Magnolia. And we are hoping that God will bless us with more children when the time is right and that happens. But so I have 3 kids, 6 and under. And I think that 2 years ago was really when I started to realize my oldest daughter is now starting to see me and emulate me and talk like me. And this really hit home when one of our babysitters was over for the evening, and she was a teacher from the school or the daycare that they were at the time. And she just pulled me aside, and in our home is crucifixes and Bibles and statues and things. So it's going to be there, right? It's all over my office here as well. But she's a Christian girl who is now our full-time house manager, by the way. So she manages three of our children, picks them up from school. And anyways, she pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I just want you to know I babysit a lot for a lot of the parents." And this was probably 2 or 3 years ago. And she said, "I have never had a student," Isabella would have been 3 or 4 at the time, trying to do something in the class. And somebody else says, "Hey, it's okay if you can't do that." And Isabella stopped, stark, looked at her and said, "Freemans don't say can't. Freemans don't say can't." And she repeated it. And just she went back to what she was doing. And when I heard that story, I was like, holy cow, what I do, what I say on a regular basis is starting to stick. And so that's when I got really serious. I might have been somewhat serious about my routine and what I'm doing and saying, but now every single morning, my son, my daughter come down to the workout room because they know where daddy's going to be. Maybe they come down a little earlier. They see me on the couch praying. Some days I may be on my knees, just opening up my arms. And what are you doing, Daddy? Well, come here, sweetheart. Today in adoration, I have a picture of my son. I have no idea when they're coming to adoration. My kids go to Catholic school, but I was there. And guess who tapped me on the shoulder? I look across, and it's my 4.5-year-old son. I guarantee you, I'm the only parent that's in adoration almost every time their parent comes. Well, every time there's all school mass, I'm in the back singing loud. He will raise you up on eagle's wings. And now I'm known as the guy who stands in the back and sings really loud. And all the kids are staring at me, right? And so now my daughter comes down and she's like, "Daddy, I need to get my pull-ups in." So I don't let my 6-year-old daughter just do pull-ups by herself. So don't get on some, I'm not training my children to be physical specimens at this point.
You're in a judge-free zone, brother.
Okay, yeah.
Judge-free.
And I hold her feet and she's fine, but she comes down and she's like, "Daddy, can I get my 10 pull-ups in?" And then when 10 comes around, I have a big sign in my workout room that says, "Go one more rep, Ed Milet, go one more." And she never stops at number 10. And so now my son is doing it. Now he's doing push-ups, right? Just because they see that and they emulate that. And so I think I got super serious and intentional about this when I started to see the children pick things up, right? And I think that was like, holy cow, eye-opening experiment and mindset shift to me to say, I might not be the best parent. I know I'm not the best parent. I fail on a regular basis, but the least I can do is lead by my actions. And I'm going to lead myself first. And I'm going to be led by God and the Holy Spirit. And then I'm going to lead myself. And then hopefully by my actions, not just by my words, I can lead the most important people that are close to me. So anyways, man, that's just a little bit of an excerpt there that really hit home for me a couple years ago.
It's great. That's a great intentionality. Leading by example. That's a theme I continue to preach and understand. You've mentioned that, like, we're always changing. And my advice to parents that you've pretty much summed up is, we have these ideas of how to have these like important talks. If you are, like you said, leading yourself first, your kids are watching you.
Yeah.
That's the best way to parent. Just let them see you do things. And we don't all have that capability of our kids are with us 24/7, obviously.
Right.
You're taking them to school. They have things that they're doing there. You're hearing stories about that. But those lessons are caught. They're not taught. So really huge thank you for the encouragement on like the praying, the workout, like the health, and like your mindset. Like Freeman's don't say can't. Is that written down somewhere in your house, or is that
no? It's just written in their methodologies. We do have the Freeman 10 Commandments posted up in our house, and we go through those as a family on a regular basis. But I wanted my children to know how to pray and to start their days that way, right? And as Catholics, we have all these different prayers that we say. Well, my children can recite almost all of them now, and actually they can actually be a part of church because they know these sayings, or these prayers. But one of the things that I've done, and I'll put this up by the screen, you guys can see, this is the full serenity prayer, right? Everybody knows, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But Reinhold Niebuhr actually has a lot more lines after that, and the prayer is much longer than that. And so every time we get in the car, I have these prayer cards for the new prayers that we're trying to learn. And before we can leave or before we can talk about it, the children have to recite those prayers. And I'm proud to say they know at least 10 different prayers now, and we do it every single day. And if I forget, Ezra, my 4.5-year-old son, will say, "Hey, Daddy, we forgot to say our prayers." And he'll start in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Take, Lord, all my liberty, all my memory, my understanding, my whole will. It's unbelievable. And then when people ride with us that have not heard that before, you hear this 4.5-year-old kid going through a 2 to 3 minute prayer from memory. It's just fascinating, right? And so I think that my mentality is, we're likely all as parents to screw our kids up in some way, but I'm going to do the best job to screw them up in the best way that I know possible, which might be routine, and it's at least faith oriented, it's fitness oriented, and it's focused on the family, right? So I thought that was pretty interesting. One of my mentors said, "Hey, I know you're doing all these things, but just know," well, he's got older children. He goes, "Just know that you can try your best, but we're not perfect, and we're definitely infallible. Sorry, we're fallible people, and we are going to screw them up in some way, but just try to do your best, and you're doing the right thing." So I try to take a lot of those pieces of fatherhood wisdom from other individuals who are maybe have older children, and I'm always asking questions on, what did you do here and in this scenario, and all these different components, and that's, again, probably the learner and the input that I've got as a talent. But I love asking those questions, because you can see folks that have 5, 6, 7 kids and running businesses, and you're like, wow, like they're operating at a high level. And then when you peel the onion back, you realize, hey man, their life is just as messy and hard and tough and just as anybody else's, right? And that's a comforting thing. I think that's a comforting thing.
Okay, tough question. I probably have 2 more questions for you. The audience here, we're dads. No one's perfect. And this isn't a podcast to be like, hey, this is how you become a perfect dad.
Right.
We're striving for that, but there's one person that lived perfectly in this
Yeah.
life, and his name was Jesus. So, and there's not going to be another one. He's the one. So if we can be like him, we're doing okay. But give me something that you've experienced maybe in the last year of a failure or an area that God was showing you that you're obviously not the only, like, feel like the devil wants to say, hey, this is a Logan problem. You're the only one that goes through this. I can't believe you let this happen again, whatever. But we know as dads, we're all struggling. It's a constant struggle.
Yeah.
Give me something that audience can relate with you on, that this was a hard thing that I had to go through personally, and you're rather still in it, or you've seen some victories from this specific thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, it was getting really real and raw with my so-called routines, and you can easily fall into specific routines as a way to make yourself feel better and feel like you are in control. Okay. So number one would be, hey, I need to think about all of the things that are not adding value to my life, right? But I turn towards in difficult circumstances. So for me, that is staying active, staying busy. So I found myself being obsessed with learning how to play golf and become a single digit handicap, and doing all these things and going to the range and all this stuff. And I realized, like, I deserve to do this, right? I've got some free time. I worked hard to do this. And that started to really be a detriment to my marriage, because my wife would say, look, I feel like you are prioritizing golf and playing there when you could be spending time with us or with me. And I said, man, that's, at first I was like, no way. I'm doing it during times that aren't going to take away from us. And I realized, no, I am. And I basically have gone cold turkey with golf. I haven't swung a club in 6, 7 months. Right. And here's the cool part is, I don't even long for that anymore. So when you rip those vices away, the other one being alcohol, I very rarely drink alcohol now. And I love making cocktails. I'm a great bartender and all these different things. I make cocktails for people all the time when they come over. Well, I have a non-alcoholic spirit that I'll make the same cocktail with, but I'll just not drink, right? Why? Well, I don't sleep very well. I'm a little bit grouchy when I wake up the next day, and I'm a little less motivated to be the best version of myself. And so, but I didn't realize, I didn't think it was a problem. Same thing with golf, right? But I started to realize that those things are not adding true value to my life. And so those are things that I had to become really real with, to say, what am I spending my time on? What am I turning towards in life when things get hard? And instead of doing that, how do I surrender that to God and actually bring that to him and say, hey, I'm struggling with this right now, and just stay there and feel that emotion and feel that pain. And Kenny, I can tell you that going through that, having a dispositional change in my personality of I don't even care to even go pick up the golf clubs and try to go hit a little white ball around a beautiful course anymore, to the point where it's like, hey, should I still be at this country club because I'm never using it, right? Like, that is a really cool growth opportunity, and I never thought that would come because I loved doing it so much. But when the love of what you're doing takes away from what you truly should be prioritizing, I think that is a message of Jesus. And as I'm going through The Chosen, I don't know why it took me so long to watch this show. I'm starting to see that be stripped away. Take Matthew, for example. He's a tax collector. He bought his first house when he was 13 years old, right? He had more money than his parents and his three uncles combined, right? But his family disowned him because of what he was doing, and he sold himself out to the devil a little bit to go make money. But he didn't think he was doing that. He was thinking he was doing something good because he's using his God-given talent. So I'd say reevaluating priorities on a regular basis has been, and changing the belief systems is really what it is. It's like something I held true to earlier on in my life is no longer true. This is a new truth. Accepting that and moving forward as the new truth is really difficult to do. And that's why people say change is the only constant, but it's the hardest thing that's always constantly changing, right? And it's very hard to accept unless you are willing to be humble enough to try to become a better version of yourself. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but those are two examples that I would say were real challenges for me. I know that sounds silly, but I know a lot of people have chains, and I know my lineage, my father, and I know my personality being obsessed. I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder as a young boy. I was on Ritalin until one day I said, I cannot do this anymore. And I remember never taking that pill again and saying, Mom, you got to find some other way for me to get past this. And she did, and it was incredible. But those two things in my life were really difficult, really big challenges for me to change my belief systems on.
Thank you for sharing that. They're not silly things. I think we all have our own silly things that we could say, don't really want anyone to know about this, or I do feel right on this, and it's not really a big deal. And I want to give accolades to your wife. We talk about family, fatherhood on the show. Guys, we don't have a family without our wives.
Yeah.
And I was recently thinking about how my wife calls me out on stuff.
Yes.
And part of me is, man, she should respect me on this. Doesn't she know how hard I work? And people don't talk to me like this. And she wasn't even like doing anything wrong.
Right. Yeah.
She like just straight up was like, do you really think this is the best thing? Blah, blah, blah. And, I don't have anyone else in my life that does that like she does, and who knows me like she does. So that knee-jerk response of I'm not taking time away from you, and
Yeah.
I feel you, and I love that you at least tried to understand what she was saying enough to come to that realization of, like, you know what, I am doing this.
Yes.
And I would like to think that your relationship has grown that much more from you not golfing, which, would you admit, was more important than golfing?
100%.
Dude,
No
I hear you,
question
man.
that.
I love that. Logan, we're out of time, buddy. I really appreciate all the insights. This has been, I feel like a time for me to just sit down and enjoy, learn from your life.
Yeah.
We're going to try to get you back on the show to talk more about Kansas City stuff, but if not, this has been hugely valuable for me, and I know my audience. Give us a final walkout of, hey, if we want to get on the Logan train of what he's up to, where he's spending time, where he's doing stuff, direct my audience where to go. And then not to be too heavy, but if you have a final closeout of just application to dads today of something that they could work on.
Well, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So Logan Freeman, just search Mr. Kansas City and I will pop up. And I post over there on a regular basis. 6 days out of the week is typically professional. And then I've taken a little flack for this and lost some followers and things like that. But every Sunday I'm going to post a reflection about what I'm learning in the gospel. And I'm okay with losing some followers because of that, because I have a platform now and I'm going to use it to my best ability. If I had any closing remarks, I would say this: you as a father have more influence on your family than you believe and than you think. And it is truly a responsibility. It is not it is a gift, but it isn't just given to you freely. It is a responsibility. So you need to be able to be able to dictate that. And it all starts with your thoughts and your belief system. And so the moment that you can realize that we are on a tiny planet in a massive atmosphere, or I don't even know the right words, right? Galaxies or whatever. We're like little ants walking around here. And your what you do on a regular basis may not seem that important to the grand scheme of things. Everything starts at home. And if you can have an influence on the people that are closest to you, there's a butterfly effect and there's a ripple effect, which that will continue to move on throughout the ethos. And so I think that for me, it really is about understanding. I'm not going to have maybe the influence or impact that certain individuals might, but I can have an influence and impact on the people that God has blessed in my life. And let's start there and let him work through me. And we have this machoism effect as men, and don't be afraid to talk about your emotions and how you're feeling. And if you need to get someone objectively coaching you through that, is one of the most beneficial things that you can do. And I do that on a regular basis. But understanding the emotions that go through your brain are extremely important to be able to influence your family in the right way. So don't think that talking about emotions is like this unmanly thing. It's actually the most manly thing that you can do is take responsibility of your own emotions and your own thoughts.
Logan Freeman, thank you so much, Mr. Kansas City. Good luck tonight on the webinar, and thank you so much for your time today with my invested fathers. To my invested fathers out there, continue to invest wisely. I'm here for you. Reach out anytime to me or Logan if there's things that we can do to help you. And thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Invested Fathers Podcast. If you liked this episode, we would love for you to click subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate all of your hard work as a father and look forward to our next episode together.